Okay, so we got to talk about this whole NYC mayor thing, huh?
Yeah, where do we even begin with this one?
Well, I guess we should tell everyone listening what we're actually talking about first.
True, true.
So, like, everyone's probably heard by now, but earlier today, federal agents raided Gracie Mansion, like actually raided it,
Yeah, it was a pretty big deal. They even seized his phone.
like straight out of a movie, right?
Right? Totally.
And obviously, we had to deep dive into this whole thing.
Oh, absolutely. This
Yeah.
is huge. I mean, we're talking about a story that's sending shockwaves through the entire city and beyond, really.
It really makes you wonder what they have on him, you know?
Right.
What are they hoping to find?
Right. It's certainly a bold move by the feds, wouldn't you say? I mean, to execute a raid of this magnitude, especially considering the target is the mayor of New York City, it suggests they've got something big, right?
Yeah. And, Mayor Adams, he's not exactly known for backing down from a fight. He's already out there with a video message defiant as ever, claiming this is all just a politically motivated witch hunt.
Yeah. That video is something else.
Like, what did you think about that whole thing?
Well, I mean, strategically, it's kind of a classic move, right? We've seen this playbook before, haven't we? A politician facing serious allegations goes on the offensive, paints themselves as a victim of their enemies, maybe even a martyr for their cause.
Right. But how effective is that really? I mean, it's one thing to cry foul. It's another thing entirely to convince people you're actually being targeted unfairly, especially when we're talking about federal charges here, right?
Oh, absolutely. An indictment, even with the details sealed as they are in this case, carries a lot of weight. It means a grand jury, a group of everyday citizens, heard evidence and decided there's enough to move forward with a formal accusation. That's not something to be brushed aside lightly.
Okay, so for those of us who don't have law degrees, break this down for us. What does this indictment actually mean in practical terms? Is it just a matter of time before Mayor Adams is packing his bags and leaving City Hall?
Well, not necessarily. It's crucial to remember that an indictment doesn't equal guilt. It's just the first step in what could be a very long legal process. Mayor Adams is entitled to due process to a fair trial, just like anyone else facing similar charges.
And his lawyer seems pretty confident that's exactly what they're going to get. In fact, he called the whole raid a spectacle, even claiming they offered to hand over the mayor's phone willingly. Almost like they were expecting it, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it is kind of strange when you put it like that. By offering up the phone, it creates the appearance of transparency, of cooperation, almost as if to say, we have nothing to hide, why the dramatic raid? It's a way of controlling the narrative, at least to some degree.
It's like they're playing 40 chess over there or something.
Right. It's all very strategic, and the stakes are incredibly high in this case. I mean, we're not just talking about one man's political career here. We're talking about the leadership of one of the most important cities in the world.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of high stakes, let's talk about the potential charges here. Because the details of the indictment are still under wraps, but we do know there's been this ongoing investigation into Mayor Adams' 2021 campaign finances.
Right.
All these allegations of shady dealings, potential ties to foreign governments. It's all a bit sus, you know?
Yeah, campaign finance laws are so complex, it's really hard to prove corrupt intent. It often comes down to connecting the dots, establishing a clear pattern of quid pro quo.
So like if someone donated a bunch of money to the mayor's campaign and then magically their company gets a big city contract, that's the kind of thing we're talking about.
Exactly. That kind of pattern, especially if it happens more than once, could be seen as evidence of something fishy. But, and this is important, the prosecution has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that there was a deliberate exchange of favors. It can't just be a coincidence. They need like a smoking gun.
And that brings us back to that video message from Mayor Adams, where he's basically already proclaiming his innocence and saying these charges are totally bogus. Is that a smart move, legally speaking?
Well, it's risky. On the one hand, it lets him try to control the narrative early on, frame himself as the victim of a political witch hunt. On the other hand, anything he says publicly can be used against him in court.
So it's a tough call. He's walking a tightrope between swaying public opinion and potentially incriminating himself.
Exactly. It's a really delicate balance, and that's what makes this case so interesting. It's this fascinating intersection of law, politics, and public perception.
So how do you think this is all playing out in the court of public opinion? Are New Yorkers rallying behind their mayor, or are they starting to doubt him?
It's too early to say for sure. But one thing's for certain, this whole scandal is really shaking things up. We're already seeing people calling for the mayor to resign. Some of them are his political opponents, of course, but even some people within his own party are saying he should step down.
Which begs the question, could this indictment, even without a conviction, be enough to end his whole career in politics?
It's definitely possible. This has the potential to be incredibly damaging. Imagine if Mayor Adams is forced to spend months, maybe even years, fighting these charges in court. Can he really govern effectively with this hanging over his head? Can he focus on the city's needs while he's fighting for his political life?
It's hard to imagine how this doesn't completely overshadow everything else going on at City Hall. And it's not just about Mayor Adams either. We can't forget about those other city officials who were also raided. Those were people in his inner circle.
Right, and those other raids are really important. They weren't random. Those raids were planned, and they were targeting people with close ties to the mayor, which suggests that this investigation is much bigger than just one man. It seems like they're trying to uncover a whole web of corruption, a system of people doing favors for each other that could go all the way to the top.
So this isn't just about a few bad apples. This could be a whole rotten orchard.
Potentially, yeah. And this is where things get really interesting from a legal strategy standpoint. Because if those other officials who were raided are also facing charges, they might be offered plea deals in exchange for cooperating with the investigation.
Ah, the old flip the script strategy.
Yeah,
Tell me more about how that works.
it's all about leverage. Prosecutors can offer things like leniency or reduce charges to people who are willing to give them information that could help them build a stronger case against someone more powerful.
And in this case, the bigger fish is Mayor Adams.
Exactly. If even one or two people in Adams's inner circle decide it's better to save themselves than to stay loyal to him, it could be the end of the line for him. Their inside knowledge, their testimony, that's gold to the prosecution. Especially in a case like this, where proving intent is so difficult.
So while Mayor Adams is out there claiming he's the victim, it's possible the walls are closing in on him.
That's the big question, isn't it? Will he be able to ride this out, or will this scandal be the end of his political career? I guess we'll have to wait and see.
This whole thing is kind of mind-boggling when you really think about it.
Yeah.
It's like this crazy mix of law and politics and public opinion.
It's definitely a spectacle, isn't it? And just like a good TV show, it leaves us with more questions than answers.
Speaking of questions, what are the key things our listeners should be paying attention to as this story unfolds?
Well, first things first, this is far from over. We're still in the early stages of what could be a very long process.
So no jumping to conclusions, right?
Yeah.
Innocent until proven guilty and all that.
Exactly. An indictment is serious, but it's not a conviction. Mayor Adams is entitled to a fair trial just like anyone else. And it's so important not to get caught up in the narratives people are trying to spin. Both sides are going to have their own version of the story.
Right. Some people are saying he's guilty before they've even seen the evidence, and others are already calling him a victim of some political conspiracy.
Exactly. So just be careful about what you're reading and hearing. Pay attention to the facts as they come out, not just the headlines.
And as we're trying to make sense of all these facts, it's important to think about what the consequences of this could be, not just for Mayor Adams, but for the entire city.
Absolutely. This scandal is creating a lot of uncertainty and instability at a time when New York City really can't afford it.
Yeah, can Mayor Adams really do his job effectively with this hanging over him? Will he have to step down? How will this affect things like the city's budget and its reputation?
Those are all big questions, and they're going to be debated for a long time to come.
And as those debates play out, it's important to remember that this isn't just a local story.
Right, this goes way beyond New York City. This case speaks to some much larger issues that are affecting our whole country.
Like the deep divisions in our society, the erosion of trust in our institutions, the challenges of trying to govern in an era where everyone's so divided.
Exactly. And those are issues that we're all grappling with in one way or another.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Just stay informed, keep asking questions, and don't believe anyone who tells you they have all the answers.
Wise words. Well, that's it for the deep dive. We'll be back next time with another deep dive into a topic that's making headlines.